Hello, Bruvs. We're back with a new book, The Memoirs of Bridget Hitler, a book that I became aware of after I randomly found this book at a thrift store for 50 cents. I read this, wasn't very good, but apparently it's based somewhat on this book. As you can see at the end of the book, there's a mention of this book. So I believe that the same people publishing this book published this book, so she had an advanced reading copy of it. And apparently, she also discovered it in a book by, what was his name? I can't remember. It was The Life and Death of Adolf Hitler. I can't remember who exactly the author was at this point, but yeah, so let's start this one. The Memoirs of Bridget Hitler, edited by Michael Unger, Duckworth Publishing, illustrated. Naive, Irish, and 17 years old, Bridget Dowling fell in love with Adolf Hitler's dashing half brother, Alois. They left Ireland to marry and settled in England in Liverpool in 1910. This revealing and intimate account of Bridget's relationship with the Hitler family makes fascinating reading. Adolf's missing year is plausibly accounted for. In 1912, Alois and Bridget meet the future Fuhrer off the train at Liverpool's Lime Street station. He is dirty, disheveled, and ill, and is a difficult guest in their home for several months. Bridget's marriage breaks down and Alois disappears at 18. Their son disappears. At 18, their son, William Patrick, decides to renew contact with his German uncle. Tension builds up when he makes several visits to Germany, finally deciding to seek employment there from Uncle Adolf. Bridget follows him to Berlin in 1937. Her meeting with the Fuhrer at his idyllic residence in the Bavarian Alps shows just how far the spineless young man of 1912 has changed. How she and later her son managed to escape the watchful eyes of Adolf and his bodyguards makes this a gripping adventure story. These memoirs can cast new light on Adolf Hitler and his immediate family, particularly his extraordinary relationship with his niece. The unusually informal photographs portray a new side of the Fuhrer. The original of Bridget Hitler's memoirs is in the manuscript division of the New York Public Library. It ends in mid sentence. Though much consulted by Hitler's biographers, it has never before been published in full. In his introduction, Michael Unger of the Liverpool Daily Post tells what is known of the manuscript's history. Pretty nondescript board, and we shall move on. Originally, someone paid $6.50. I paid $30 because it took $20 some to ship it here from Canada. 1979, Gerald Duckworth, blah, blah, blah. Let's get right to the introduction. Michael Unger. These unfinished memoirs were written by an Irish woman who, through the accident of marriage, became related to one of the most notorious men of our time. Bridget Elizabeth Dowling was 17 when she met, immediately fell in love with, and married Alois, the volatile elder half-brother of Adolf Hitler, Fuhrer of the Thousand-Year Reich. The existence of Bridget's memoirs has been generally known since the early 1970s, when the historian Robert Payne, that's who it was, gathering material for his book, The Life and Death of Adolf Hitler, read them in the manuscript division of the New York Public Library. Payne's discovery and the account in the memoirs of Hitler's alleged visit to Liverpool in 1912 led, in the spring of 1973, to a lengthy series of articles in the Liverpool Daily Post. Since then, a number of historians have referred to the memoirs, the most serious analyst being Professor Robert Waite in his study of Hitler, the psychopathic god. This is the first time, however, that the memoirs have been published in full. Bridget wrote the memoirs in America during World War II, and the unevenness of style suggests that she must have some sort of professional guidance. The typewritten document, entitled My Brother in Law Adolf, is 225 pages long. It is undated and unfinished, ending on a comma halfway through a sentence. There is no handwriting on the document, save the occasional word crossed out and another penned above it. The typescript came into the hands of the New York Public Library as part of a collection of papers belonging to the late Dr. Edmund Pauker. Pauker was a European born theatrical agent, a playbroker, and literary agent for playwrights, particularly Hungarian and German playwrights, the most notable of whom was Ferenc, I don't know how to say it, Ferenc Molnar. How Pauker came into possession of the memoirs is not known. His son John told me in 1973, when I was preparing the article for the Liverpool Daily Post, my father, like any theatrical agent, received literally thousands of manuscripts. I don't have the faintest idea how he came by that one, and I don't recall seeing it when I went through his papers after his death. Believe me, I would have kept it myself if I had come across it. Why were the memoirs never published at the time? Perhaps they were incomplete, or Pauker decided that the market was already glutted with recollections of Hitler. Maybe he thought he was sitting on a gold mine and was merely waiting for Bridget to finish what she had begun. Perhaps he never even knew he had them. The reason why Bridget's manuscript ends so abruptly is equally open to conjecture. Perhaps she did finish the document, but the final pages were lost. Or was it that her ghostwriter lost interest and Bridget simply couldn't continue the work on her own? In any event, the New York Library collated the available pages and thought them of sufficient importance to be bound in hardcovers and preserved in the manuscript room. The memoirs begin by describing in detail how Bridget met and fell in love with Eloise. Her family disapproved of her choice, and she eloped with him to London. On 12 March 1911, 9 months and 9 days after their London wedding, their only child, William Patrick, was born in the couple's flat in the Toxteth district of Liverpool. Bridget tells how she and Eloise immediately had their constant differences of opinion. This time, on what to call the child, Eloise favored Willie, while Bridget insisted on Pat. In 1973, Albert Whitehead, a retired electricity installation inspector, gave the following account of William Patrick as a boy to the Liverpool Daily Post. I first got to know Willie in the early 1920s when we both went to St. Margaret's Church of England School, Princess Road, Prince's Park. He lived in the same street as I did. We became friends, and he joined our scout troop, the 222nd Liverpool, which later became the 11th Toxteth. He was in my patrol, the Curlews, of which I was the leader. Willie and his mother eventually left the neighborhood to live in London. I know Willie went to Germany to meet Uncle Adolf, and I can remember the Path News showing Willie Hitler sailing to America. Willie was a quiet, pale boy. He was a Roman Catholic, although he went to our school and often went to the Anglican cathedral with me. The Hitler family's former home in Upper Stanhope Street was not hit by a bomb, as is widely believed, but it was badly damaged by a bomb which destroyed my own former home at 115. Of our houses, 113, 115, 117, and 119 were all destroyed by a stick of bombs, but no one was killed. I believe it was the last stick of bombs to fall on Liverpool. The original of the memoirs of Bridget Hitler, as they are today in the manuscript room of the New York Public Library. On the binding is the title, My Brother Adolf. You can't really see it. Let me turn on the light. I don't think you can see anything. You can see it on the side. Arthur Bryan of Crosby near Liverpool was also at school with William Patrick. He remembered being in Dieppe, I don't know how to say that, at the beginning of World War II. I ran into an old schoolmate, he recalled in the Post, and he said to me, "Remember Willie Hitler?" That's when I realized that Willie had always talked about this uncle of his, who, he said, was a general in Germany. It would appear, both from newspaper cuttings and articles about William Patrick and Bridget, that as soon as the son was old enough to realize the value of his relationship to his uncle, he was actively encouraged by his mother to capitalize on it. Indeed, Bridget, in her memoirs, unwittingly substantiates this impression. It is this very fact that lends credibility to her own incredible narrative. She is at all times naively anxious to present herself as the good mother, the pretty, deserted wife, the innocent bystander. It should not be forgotten that when her son first made contact with Hitler, Bridget states that she had no idea that Alois was still alive. She believed herself to be a widow, but Alois was alive and had apparently contracted a bigamous marriage. It is not surprising, therefore, that Adolf Hitler was less than delighted at the arrival of his Liverpool nephew. Then, as now, scandal could mean the end of a political career. Hitler's English nephew is here. Part of an article about William Patrick from the Daily Express of 22 November 1937. At times, William Patrick's attitude to Adolf is ambivalent. There is evidence that during visits to Germany in the 1930s, he was treated with scorn by Hitler and his subordinates. Yet he was still able to tell the London Daily Express on 22 November 1937, "In Germany, I am a private individual, and in England, I am a private individual. I have no authority to make any political statements, and I would not want to say anything to embarrass my uncle. My mother is Irish and a good Catholic, and I find it very difficult to convert her to National Socialism. There are many things she feels very bitter about." Apart from annoyance at Adolf's lack of interest in her son, Bridget was also becoming bitter about her nationality. On her marriage to Alois, she had become an Austrian citizen, and when Austria was annexed by Germany, she became a German. This caused her no problems until the late 1930s, when relations between Germany and Britain became strained. Then she suddenly realized how much she wanted to become British. In the same 1937 interview in the Daily Express, William Patrick said, "Recently, the Austrian consulate refused to renew her papers, so that now she has no country." A year later, they were living in a small semi-detached house in Hornsey in North London, and Bridget was still trying without success to become a British subject. She is quoted again in the Daily Express as follows: "I want to get back my British nationality. I've seen the Home Office and they want to help me, but unless my marriage can be dissolved, I must remain an alien. Just to think that I, that was, am now a German subject since Hitler took Austria. As a Catholic, I don't believe in divorce. My husband and I are separated, but that isn't good enough for the Home Office. Nowadays, it's a bit embarrassing to be Mrs. Hitler, but the people who know me don't mind, and the others don't matter. At heart, I'm still Bridget Dowling, but oh, it's my British nationality I want." The following caption appeared in the London Evening Standard on 20 January 1939. Mrs. Hitler answers to Rate Simmons, Mrs. Bridget Hitler, Irish-born sister-in-law of the German Fuhrer, pictured today at Highgate Police Court, where she appeared to answer a summons for non-payment of rates amounting to £9, 13, whatever that is, and 10 drachma. I don't know what it is. Mrs. Hitler offered to pay the money in 6 weeks, and this was accepted. The picture caption states that Bridget had just been offered a job as a hostess in a New York nightclub. A year later, she and her son had moved to 27 Priory Gardens, Highgate, North London, and had begun to take in lodgers. In fact, on 20 January 1939, Bridget Hitler appeared at Highgate's police court, where she had been summoned for failing to pay £9, 13 squids, 10 dinosaurs due in rates. After the hearing, at which she was given 6 weeks to pay, she said, "I was expecting some money from Germany, but I can't say anything about it." When William Patrick Hitler, aged 33, was sworn into the U.S. Navy in April 1944, the event was deemed worthy of a photograph. The picture right was taken by an Associated Press photographer. Later that year, the couple decided to emigrate to America. Despite problems over papers, they managed to get visitors' visas. On arrival in New York on 30 March, William Patrick told waiting reporters, "In the event of war, I'll join up immediately." He was, however, unable or unwilling to shake off his obsession with Hitler. He supported his mother and himself by undertaking a lecture tour. His subject was naturally enough life in contemporary Germany and my uncle Adolf. No doubt his lectures were similar in content to two articles he wrote at the time. One, "Why I Hate My Uncle," published in Look magazine in January 1939, and the other, "Mon Onkel Adolf," published in Paris Sauter the following August. For some time, William Patrick earned his living in this way, and who can blame him? He would hardly have been asked to lecture on the subject of Hitler, or indeed on any other subject, if he had not been a relative. When war came, despite his patriotic feelings, he was not allowed to join up immediately. The Americans were highly suspicious of him. Eventually, they relented, and in April 1944, William Patrick Hitler, then aged 33, was sworn into the U.S. Navy at a recruiting center in New York. The following month, on 12 May, he joined up at Algiers, Louisiana. His recruiting officer was one Gail K. Hess, an interesting name in the circumstances. What's this? The New York Times, June 25th, 1941. The sister-in-law of Adolf Hitler began working yesterday as a volunteer at headquarters of the British War Relief Society. After serving in the Navy, William Patrick was honorably discharged. Subsequently, he worked for a time in the urology department of an American hospital. He then decided to go into total obscurity and changed his name. According to the historian John Tolland, he is still alive, age 67, but refuses to discuss his past and wishes to have absolutely nothing to do with his late uncle. Bridget Hitler seems to have chosen to fight the Nazis at about the same time as her son. The New York Times of 25 June 1941 stated that she had started work at the headquarters of the British War Relief Society at 730 Fifth Avenue, opposite Tiffany's. The article which accompanied Bridget's photograph in the New York Times, reproduced above. Her husband's activities are rather better documented than her own. During most of the 1930s, Alois kept a small inn in a Berlin suburb, but in 1937 he branched out in a big way by opening a new cafe restaurant in Berlin's fashionable West End. In this restaurant, he played a canny game of appearing to keep out of politics on the one hand, while at the same time trading on his brother's name. The animosity that once existed between the two seems by now to have vanished, because in a 1938 will, Adolf left Eloise 60,000 marks. The will was not discovered until 1953. Eloise seems to have been something of an embarrassment to the German authorities, though he managed to keep his restaurant open throughout the war. In 1945, he tried to slip through the occupation forces by changing his name to Eberly, but he was arrested for being in possession of false identification papers and was handed over to the British. A few weeks later, in August, he was released. A statement by the military authorities ran, "It is clear to us that he has led a perfectly blameless existence, being absolutely scared stiff of being associated in any way with the former Führer's activities. Soon after, now suffering from rheumatism, he and his common law wife moved to Hamburg, where they lived with friends while waiting to return to the American sector of Berlin to reclaim his restaurant. He had now legally changed his name from Hitler not to Eberly but to Hiller, because I had never found the name Hitler any help, and it is now a positive disadvantage. Eventually, in early 19 in the early 1950s, he took up politics for the first time, being associated with an extreme right-wing nationalistic movement of which, according to reports, he soon became leader. This political party seems to have foundered before it really got started, and by 1953 he was known to have been selling portraits of his brother Adolf to tourists, having signed them himself. He was quoted in that year as saying Adolf seemed ashamed of having a brother running a wine shop. The last record of him appears in the Hamburg newspaper Bild Zeitung, which states that he was seen in Austria in 1968. Bridget's memoirs make remarkable reading. She claims that from November 12th to April 1913, Adolf Hitler was an unwelcome guest in the flat in Upper Stanhope Street, Liverpool. She says that Hitler, in a fit of incestuous passion, killed his own niece, Gili, and that as a young man he had been a draft dodger who had lived on charity in an old people's home rather than find work or serve in the army. Among those most critical of the suggestion that Hitler ever visited Liverpool is Professor Robert Waite. As Waite rightly points out, Bridget would have been aware that the early biographies of Hitler spoke of a lost year during the Vienna period in which virtually nothing was known about him. Therefore, says Waite, she would have felt safe in filling the gap by having Adolf go to England to visit her family for the entire period. Waite gives a number of reasons for believing that Bridget invented parts of her diary. Some are trivial, such as that she mistakes the color of Gili's hair. Some are mere matters of opinion or point of view. I found him weak and spineless, says Bridget. Spineless he was not, says Waite. However, Waite deduces two weighty arguments from silence. A. The Viennese authorities imply that Hitler was in Vienna during the time that Bridget claims he was in Liverpool, while the British immigration authorities have no record of his entry, and B. Hitler never spoke of a trip to Liverpool to anyone. Taking Waite's first point, it should be noted that it is just as easy to claim that Hitler was not in Vienna as it is to claim that he was, and the honest answer must be that we simply do not know, one way or the other, even though one man, Karl Hanisch, did claim to have been in Vienna with Hitler at the time. Since it was an offense to leave the country without express permission, not to mention the offenses of avoiding conscription and traveling under a false name, Adolf is unlikely to have broadcast his intention to leave by using his own name. As for alien regulations in Britain before 1914, these did not exist. In 1905, an act covered the control of steerage passengers, the infirm and the sick, but this regulation was extremely lax, and Home Office officials say that it could have been contravened easily. Home Office officials are also comment that even if the authorities did keep some sort of records, it would be impossible to check them now. Waite's second argument is perhaps stronger. There is no mention of a visit to England in any of Hitler's speeches, books, or lengthy table talk, nor is there mention of it in any authentic memoir written by others who knew him. Heinz Ling, his valet of 10 years' service, says flatly that with the exception of brief trips to Italy and Paris, the Fuhrer had visited no other country. Lloyd George, the Duke of Windsor, Unity Mitford, and many other British personalities conducted long, intimate conversations with Hitler about every topic under the sun, and he never mentioned such a visit to any of them. It is arguable that he may have wished to keep the visit quiet, either because he was ashamed of it or because he felt it might prejudice the myth of his resolute progress to power. But this is hardly a compelling explanation. It is certainly more likely on the face of it that Bridget invented this part of her memoirs in order to place Hitler under some obligation and thus get money for her and her child. On the other hand, it has to be admitted by the skeptics that as a whole, Bridget's memoirs are not overwritten. Apart from the few melodramatic touches here and there, she writes simply and sensibly, and her description of Hitler's arrival in Liverpool is circumstantial and convincing in itself. The question must remain open. An imaginative reconstruction of the young Hitler's visit to Liverpool based on the memoirs is given by Beryl Bainbridge in her recent novel Young Adolf, published by Duckworth in UK and Braziller in US. And that's the book I was telling you about. So one book leads to another. Oops. The main doubt about the memoirs concerns Hitler's alleged murder of his niece Gili. It is known that Hitler was briefly away from Munich when Gili died, and that he raced home to find her dead. He could not, therefore, have shot Gili himself, as Bridget states, nor could Leo, Gili's brother, have taken the revenge she describes. Hitler would have had him removed. Far from removing him when Leo was captured on the Russian front, Hitler intervened to have him exchanged. Moreover, a different version by Bridget of this event is recorded in Ernst Hansstagel's book, The Missing Years. Stangels says, "It was not until the autumn of 1937, when I was in exile in London, that I was given another leading clue which might explain the change in Hitler's attitude between the time he wrote the letter and the morning row on the day Gili Rabol died." I'm sure I'm butchering that name, but I was visited by Mrs. Bridget Hitler, an Irish woman who had met Hitler's half-brother Alois, the full brother of Angela Robel, in Dublin in 1909. She maintains that the immediate family knew very well that the cause of Gili's suicide was the fact that she was pregnant by a young Jewish art teacher in Linz, whom she had met in 1938 and wanted to marry at the time of her death. The pregnancy is consistent with the memoirs, but here is Mrs. Bridget Hitler. But here is Bridget's apparently telling Hampstangel that Gili killed herself, a statement contradicted by the memoirs. Not all that Bridget writes, however, is historically doubtful. As is clear from the memoirs, from his own writings, and from the interviews he gave over a period of time, William Patrick, encouraged by his mother, played on the uncle-nephew connection, hoping for considerable financial gain, particularly from his visits to Germany. The miserable sum of money he was given annoyed them both, and it is clear that Bridget tried to force Adolf's hand by selling their story to the American Hearst Group. The memoirs state that she did this innocently at the request of Alois. When, in 1930, Adolf found out about the story, he flew into a rage, ordering William Patrick to visit him. He even told the German magistrate that his nephew had tried to blackmail him. During the subsequent interview, as the memoirs state, Adolf laid into William Patrick with a vengeance. Luckily for Bridget and her account, there was a witness to the interview. The witness was Hans Frank, later head of the general government of Poland, and formerly Hitler's lawyer, who was subsequently hanged at Nuremberg. While waiting to be executed for his war crimes, Frank wrote his own memoirs, Im Schatten des Galgens, in the shadow of the gallows, in which he described the Führer's rage at his nephew's demands for money, and now, fearing that William Patrick's persistence would rake up the past and reveal that Hitler's father was illegitimate and possibly born of a Jewish girl, Frank was commissioned to investigate the family's ancestry. There is probably no reason to doubt the overall authenticity of these memoirs, despite the fact that some details are certainly inaccurate. We must remember that Bridget was neither a politician nor a historian, but a simple Irish girl. Now that her memoirs are available in full, the only memoirs by any relation of Hitler, their merits can be properly debated and will no doubt be debated for years to come. Not particularly, they've just basically ignored them. So much for that theory, buddy. All right. We will leave off there. What's this go in sections? 3, 4, 7. I think it's just little sections. How many sections are there? 13, 14. Not many. Approximately 15 sections. I guess we could read the back cover. Oh, there's nothing there. There's Duckworth, and there's that book that they mentioned. So yeah, let's see what this says. Oh, young Adolf. All right, that's all for now, bruvs.